Hey, everybody, welcome to Local Musicians.
XP.
And my name is Chris Burroughs, and I am with my great co host, Tyrone Jackson, and our lovely, well, is lovely, is that a good word? Yes, he is he's a lovely cat, man. He's a lovely chap.
All about love.
Our great brother and friend, Jez Graham, is with us.
So good to see you both.
And we're going to just chop it up with Jez a little bit here. We're going to talk a little bit about his upbringing. There's going to be a couple of different parts to this episode where we're going to talk to Jez. We also have a segment where Tyrone and Jez are going to go off on their own and talk keyboard talk. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and a little bit about your musical upbringing, man.
I was born in Binghamton, New York.
Wow.
But I know nothing about it because I left when I was 1 year old.
Oh, wow.
Moved into New York City, where I lived until I was about 11 years old, and then to a little town called Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And that's where I wound up starting to play gigs and take lessons with a great piano teacher named Mike Schiffer, who turned me on to jazz. Binghamton, it's funny, I got this new album coming out that I gotta promote on Bandcamp. Tyrone, you were talking last night about that. Music's free now, right? Everyone gets their music, and that's cool. But Bandcamp is a way that people can support music. So it's 7 original jazz compositions that I wrote basically last fall over the course of a couple months. And it's much more traditional for me than a lot of the stuff I've done. Somehow I was at the airport and I started playing these tunes and mixed in with this stuff. And I started writing new stuff. And at first, it's like, wow, this is more traditional. And I had to make sure I sent them to a couple of friends and make sure that I actually wrote these things. Because, they're like changes that are familiar, It's a duo album with Emrah Kotan, who's a wonderful person and amazing musician. And we recorded it right in my music room. Bill, our son Bill, recorded it. And anyway, I'm excited about it. And I wrote enough tunes that there's already a volume 2 that I'm going to do with a bigger group. I'm going to expand it. We're going to add Ramon. We're going to make probably a quintet recording, but that won't be till next year. But anyway, So I lived in Massachusetts and then eventually moved to Berkeley, California. Oakland, California, then Los Angeles, which is where I met Mindy, who is my beautiful wife. We got married, moved to Atlanta to raise a family in '88, and we've been here ever since. Wow. Came here to both raise a family and the idea that maybe I could be a working musician, somewhere other than LA, because I remember Mindy saying, did you ever think of living somewhere other than LA and being a musician somewhere else? I said, no. Never even considered that. We had a friend here who was ill at the time, and we came to visit. Wound up, let's try it for a year and spend some time with our friend Chuck, who wound up passing away a year later. We're thankful to him because he got us here. Because when we got here, we came to visit. I went out to Cafe 290. Everyone said you got to go to Cafe 290. I met Dan Coy, Paul Fallett, Russ Rogers, and Bill Wilson. I sat in, and it was such a warm feeling in there. It was in the winter. It was such a warm feeling. And these cats said to me, I said, we're thinking of moving here. And they go, if you were moving here, you'd be working all the time. Well, I wasn't working all the time in LA. I was doing lots of cool things, auditions.
I was going to say, what were some of the things that you were doing in LA when you?
I had a steady gig. I had one gig at a place called Skippy's Golden Gopher in East LA, Monterey Park. That was a pretty cool gig and it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So I was like steady. And, I was playing key bass. And the gig didn't pay that good, but I got like $15 extra for playing key bass. Ever heard of that? We don't do that here.
No.
We don't get extra for playing key bass.
Right, we should.
But anyway, I kind of learned a lot on that gig. And but other than gigging, auditioning, trying to make it. I was writing songs, doing demo recordings, and, a lot of cool things. Chris and I have talked about, you're probably alluding to Missing Persons. got to play with Terry Bozzio.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. I thought, this is my big break. I'm going to make it. You know, I was young, you know, it was 1980. So I was 21, 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you had a Rhodes. You had a Rhodes and you had a...
You can't play a Rhodes in a synth pop band.
No.
It doesn't work. So they got this guy, Chuck Wild, who did a great job. I've seen his credits on Quincy Jones albums.
Wow.
And like a Michael Jackson album too. Like he became like a big synthesizer guy. But anyway, musically, that was a real high point. One of my favorite things was playing with Shuggie Otis. We talked about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know Chris loves Shuggie. Tyrone, are you with Shuggie?
Not that much.
I recently been in touch with Nick.
Yeah,
Otis, who is Shuggie's brother. And
we all hung
Nick's
out in Atlanta.
Yeah, right. And Nick's gonna come on and talk about the Otis family legacy. It was his dad, Johnny Otis. Yeah.
You know, when I went to their house, I answered an ad in the equivalent of the Creative Loafing, but the LA version. Anyway, looking for a keyboard player. Call Shuggie Otis. I was like, Shuggie Otis, because I knew his name. I knew his name because he played octave bass on Peaches and Regalia, the Zappa song. That's where I knew his name from. Plus, I had the album Cooper Session that Al Cooper did on him. So I called and I went over there, and they lived in Inglewood, and the door opened. It was Johnny Otis. Open because it's his house. They all lived with him.
Wow.
What a great cat, man. He was so warm, invited me in. And I'd never talked about keyboards. I'd never seen so many keyboards in this house. They had the B3, but they had a thing called a Chamberlain, which is kind of like a Mellotron. Anyway, just me and Shuggie and Nick used to just jam. I mean, we jammed a whole bunch of times, you know, and I played their keyboards, but I brought this synthesizer called an Electrocomp. EML, I think, was the company. That's what kind Tommy Mars used. He's a mentor of mine. He used it with Frank Zappa. It's kind of like a mini Moog. It's got the knobs. Anyway, when Chris and I saw Shuggie here in Atlanta, and I went up to Nick at the side of the stage, I said, "You probably don't remember me. I used to come up over to your house and jam with you." He goes, "I remember you, and I remember your keyboard. You had some weird keyboard." And that was when we all went backstage. Remember, I said, "I'd like to come back and pay our respects to Shuggie."
Absolutely.
And that's when we all went back, and Mike Hinton was with it. That was a great night. But
that was
Shuggie
a great night, man.
Heavy cat.
What drew you to keys? Like, did you play any other instruments before?
We always had a piano in the house. I've told this story a lot. I'll tell it here. The old fake books where the first page had the chords in each key, right? Yeah. Do they still do that? I don't know, like C major, major seven, you know, diminished, augmented, right? All that stuff. Right. So in 1969, when I was 10, I liked the Doors, the band The Doors. If I listen to them now, like I listen to the organ player. No disrespect to Ray Manzarek, because he was great for the Doors and he played key bass, but not the way we play key bass. You know,
right.
He held like a static thing. You know,
right.
But I have a lot of respect for him. But I'm just saying, at the time, they were on the radio a lot. You know, I would listen to the top 10, and I liked the Doors.
It was a new sound, right?
Yeah, I like the sound of that, and you know, I like Light My Fire and Break On Through. I like the sound. And I told my father, I really want to get an electric organ, because I played the piano a little bit. We had an upright piano in the house, and I would play. We had a lot of fake books. He could plunk out some chords and sing, and we'd do standards. And anyway, I wanted an organ. He tells me, learn all the chords in every key, and I'll get you an electric organ. So I learned all the chords, you know, or at least a lot of them. Probably not everyone. Yeah. And I got the organ, but that didn't last. I don't play organ. I want to hear you play organ. Not the kind that the Doors used.
You got to come by the crib. You got to come by the crib for real.
There it is.
Oh my! Beautiful, beautiful. Love it. I love it.
Woo!
Yeah, that is beautiful, beautiful Hammond B3. Wow.
There's Rhodes right next to it.
See, I'm gonna come over there one day. I'm telling you. I used to play B3 with Francine sometimes if they had one.
Really?
Like at the Portland Blues Festival, I played, and people are like, man, it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just go, turn the Leslie on. Anyway, the Doors thing didn't last very long. When we moved to Massachusetts, my father ran a radio station, and they played a wide variety of music. And that's a lot of the influence I got was from listening to that station. And I got this piano teacher named Mike Schiffer. He's 92 years old right now. I'm still in touch with him. Wow. And he taught me jazz. I was getting interested in jazz because I did have an uncle, Harold Granowski, later Harold Grant. He was a drummer who played with Lenny Tristano. He actually played with Wes Montgomery. They were from Indianapolis. And I've heard stories about that Wes used to come over to my grandparents' house and jam with my uncle back in the 50s. So Leonard was also a musician, another uncle. But so, we knew a lot about jazz, of course, but at the time I was much more into rock and the Beach Boys. And, I think listening to Frank Zappa opened me up to a lot of jazz. But when I got with Mike Schiffer, he literally took his record collection and he taught a class to me and my friends called Jazz Listening in his house in Massachusetts, which is amazing.
Wow.
And he basically taught us the whole history or a lot of the history, and all the piano players. These guys played with Miles, and then they went and they did this. And this is when the fusion era was coming up. And my teacher, he couldn't hang with the fusion thing. He tried, but that wasn't his thing. But he taught us the roots, a lot about Monk. He taught me to write chord charts. I started composing around then when I was around 12, 13. Wrote my first song. It's called Jez Says. It's an instrumental. And really encouraged me to write. And and then I got to play with these musicians around Massachusetts. A guy named Kenny Aronoff, who was a good bit older than me, probably 6, 7 years older. And we were close with his family. And we were in a group called Ball of Confusion that did a lot of funk and Hendrix and Aretha, and then fusion stuff, a lot of Billy Cobham. And there was another guy named Ed Mann, who you might know his name from Zappa, where he was a mallet player, but he was actually a phenomenal drummer who had the best feel. And he played I was fortunate to have these people mentor me, and Tommy Mars, the keyboardist. I really put a lot of it to the mentors that I had. And my parents, they always encouraged me to, explore the music and creativity. So
do you mentor people now, like take people under your wing, or how is it?
There's this harmonica player at the airport, man, a young kid, he's like 26 years old, and, he works there at some place, but he wants to play. In fact, I sent him over to Joe's Jam. I think he did come once.
Maybe that, They had a guy.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah. Nice kid. And we talked, I was like, well, wait a minute. No, this is where you lay back. When the other person's soloing, you got to play rhythm. Don't just blow all the time. Nice. And what's cool is now I see he comes by and he has different keys of harmonicas. And, we're trying to do some like jump blues and some just different feels. And I noticed, I noticed the progression, and it makes me feel good, because it's like, I think it's imperative that we share our knowledge with younger people.
How do you feel about you, since you have, did you think that your kids were going to be in music and as much?
I'll tell you a funny thing about that. When in this area in the Berkshires where we used to live in Massachusetts, they had a place called the Music Inn. They had concerts every summer. You might know about this place because you might have read about it, because in the 50s there was jazz at Music Inn, and there was this whole educational thing. It was a George Russell. I can't remember exactly.
George Russell, Lydian Chromatic,
maybe, and from Modern Jazz Quartet.
Yeah.
Randy Weston was there. So there was a history of jazz there. In the summer of 73 and 74, there were concerts, rock concerts mainly, but also everything. I saw Herbie one summer, Herbie and the Headhunters. Opening act was Return to Forever. Wow. Weather Report with Greg Errico on drums. Right?
Wow. That was short-lived, right?
Short-lived. So anyway, there was one of the concerts that summer was Dave Brubeck, It was called Two Generations of Brubeck. Remember hearing about that, where his kids played with him?
Yes.
And I saw this concert, and at that age, I said to myself, well, wouldn't it be cool one day to get married and have kids and have them play music, and then we could play together? I actually had that concept. It was like, that's what I know, I want that. But then once we had kids, of course, people always ask, well, how did you get them to practice? That's a question. It's like, never ever told them to practice. They just, like Mindy always says, we had a music room. That's it. We just had a music room. There was always music. They had their bands. They did their thing. And we used to have a family band, you know. We called it 3 out of 4. That was our family band. And, you know, it was real sad when we couldn't really do that anymore. But then again, you realize they have to go and do their thing, you know. And now they create, and Jana's writing incredible music, and Bill's doing great music. And so, yeah, I mean, it became obvious after a while they were gonna be musicians, and that was cool. But I never pushed it on me. That was never.
You seem to fall into these long gigs, man, like the Martini Club. You find it's like you can do something for.
Yeah, it's weird. I like consistency. See, I like going to the same place every day. It's like, I'm doing this gig the rest of my life. That is my goal, because that's my happy place. And I like going to the same place. You know, I need that. I like that consistency. But yeah, I did the road thing with Colonel Bruce for a while, and I loved the gigs, but I hated the road and the band.
Right.
I don't survive in the band. When we used to fly places, it was good. Me and Bruce would fly to San Francisco or New York and pick up some players in those towns. That was fun. But I couldn't do the riding in the band, and it's not my thing. But I mean, the people who do it and love it, I think it's great.
Right.
You know, some people love being on the road. I like being home. I like being with my wife and being in our nice home and just chilling out and going to work and coming home. So yeah, I have been lucky. I've been very lucky to have been able to find those kind of. I was with Francine 25 years, basically.
Wow. And for our listeners out there, what would you call it, Jez? It's like it was a piano summit, but we had like duos that we did, and we
at Georgia State. It was like all two piano players paired together, and we did 2 songs, I think. 2 songs,
right?
Duo.
Two Steinway pianos or whatever it was, back to back or end to end or center to center, however you want to say it. And so there were a lot of great piano players there. They paired me and Jez together. I think Gary Motley and somebody was paired, Kevin Bales and Kenny Banks. Senior.
Yeah, I remember this. Where was
long
that?
time ago? Long time ago.
Yeah, Copland Hall at Georgia State.
That's right.
And did we play Dolphin Dance, perhaps?
Oh wow, yeah, and I think something in the D minor thing. Yesterday's, yeah.
Yeah, Yesterday's and Alone Together. I always mix them up.
Yeah, me too. But Chris, it was one of those things where like everybody was like, "Are we going to get together and try to map things out and stuff?" And I was hoping that it wasn't going to be that, because everybody knows Gary is very meticulous. So I think whoever was lined up with Gary, they already had 2 rehearsals or something, right? So I called Jez up. I was like, "What do you want to do?" He's like, "Man, let's just let it happen."
You know, I don't go for rehearsals.
I was like, "My man."
No, you just go and do it.
Right.
Is that something that you've always had? Just that way of thinking? Did that come through?
No, it's a very specific
spiritual meditation, or it's
a very specific thing. It comes from meditation. I learned what's called transcendental meditation when I was 14, 15. So that's a lot of years, because I'm 65.
That's now. What Stevie talks about in Jesus Children America. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in fact, the Beach Boys music, they sang a lot about that as well. And that was very inspiring to me. They did an album with Charles Lloyd. Not many.
Whoa.
Know this, but Charles Lloyd had an album, Waves. Oh, he worked with them a lot, actually, in the early 70s, because they were all involved in meditation. It's really funny, because I just ran into Al Jardine of the Beach Boys at the airport the other day. And I told him I've met him before, but I said, I really was inspired to meditate by a lot of your music, specifically what you did with Charles Lloyd. And he was like, "What?" Because they had an album called Waves, and Charles Lloyd got some of the Beach Boys and other people too, Roger McGuinn from the Byrds. and they sang about meditation. And so I got into meditating. And when I play at the airport, I meditate before I play every time. And when you come out of it, you're in the present. You're just in like the moment. And so that's why I can play really long sets and just go with the flow. And I attribute it all.
You're the culprit. You're messing it up for us other piano players that you can play.
Only at the airport. You know, if you take a break at the airport, what are you going to do? It's so crowded and crazy going. It's like the safest place is at the piano. And Bill, my son, he plays there too. He's the same way. You sit at the piano, you're safe. You're in it. That's like that. That's like your safe space because it's like Times Square. Otherwise, you sit at the piano and just keep playing. And what do we love to do? We love to make music. There, you don't have to meditate. You might just sit and pray, and that's important as well. Getting focused, getting balanced, getting your spiritual center, whatever it is you're doing. Other than that, it's coffee. Okay.
Well, you know, and even like in the Christian faith, meditation is important. People rarely take the time to do it, you know? And so if you think about that as far as who we are as people, yesterday, I'm not the same person I was, you know, I am today. So, That's right. And you can't control the future. So you might as well live in the present. You might as well be like, okay, this is what I'm presenting today. And it may change. And that's the beautiful thing about human existence is that I can change if I need to change, right? That hope is there, you know, or as we're practicing, there's something we're trying to nail and get better at. It's the hopes that one day it's going to be incorporated in my language, my playing, or one day it might come out of nowhere. I might discover something about my playing, about myself, about this instrument, about whatever, you know?
And that's inspiring. Like I'm inspired. Like I see Chris, some of the things you put up on Instagram, the things you're working on. That's inspiring. It's like, you know, we should always keep working on ourselves and keep growing. There's so many avenues where we can grow and try and better ourselves and our music and the universe and the world around us.
Jez, I think back to the first time I heard you play, and it was with Chris. I think Chris invited me. I'm thinking it was at some department store like Bloomingdale or something like that, right? And I remember you guys doing Blue and Green as a reggae, right? Kind of feel. Y'all probably don't even remember that. But I did. I remember seeing you cats play. But this openness that you have to playing, and even you have like your own notation for things, right? I offered to give you some, you know, some chord sheets that I had for church, for church. You're like, that's cool. I just prefer to do my own notation, which all of us have our own little notation for stuff, especially chords to help us remember things.
Yours were helpful though. I keep those in my file. I refer to those.
Okay. Yeah. So, but we all have our own way. But you, I think even your daughter Jana and Bill, y'all have your own way of like processing things. Is that a hindrance in this world of playing music, or are you accepted, or how do you navigate that successfully, like having your own way of looking at things, which I think is great, by the way, but how do you successfully?
I kind of wish, sometimes I regret that I didn't have more formal training, and then maybe I wouldn't have my own way of doing it. You know what I'm saying? I kind of had
other people flip it around. They say they wish they didn't have the formal training.
Yeah. I had great piano teachers and stuff, but I didn't. I don't have a degree or anything, and I respect the work you've done for what you're doing for your doctorate and everything.
Right.
I gotta take some lessons with you. Is what I need to do.
Barter is smarter. That's what we do. But yeah, is that like a hindrance to? I mean, obviously you can play, so it's not a hindrance.
No, I never felt as comfortable with like reading Joe's big band book and stuff. It's like I have to really focus on that. So that is where I'm more comfortable, kind of doing things my way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know you from, and this is a long time ago. But when you were working with Del Baroni and his same thing, had a big book and charts and
I learned a lot from that gig.
That's what I was saying. But you would always mention it's like, man, I'm not a great reader, but this is good for me to have to kind of And that's the way I feel. It's like, you know, when I get in those situations, if I'm there for a while, I get totally cool. But it's like, if you're not there all the time on that stuff, you know, it takes you a minute to kind of like reprogram yourself to kind of be able to stay in the present. You know, we're talking about staying in the present,
and that's where you
really kind of stay on the page. It's a discipline thing.
But that's where you get mentors too. Like on Joe's gig, I remember so many times like Mace and Kenyon Carter would help me out. You know, okay, now we're going over here. This is going, and it's like, okay. And on the Dell gig, man, those charts were some of the most beautiful charts ever by Rick Bell.
Rick Bell was
these charts, man. They actually made me a better player. They made me a better player and reader because I was using the side of my brain that's not the go with the flow part.
This subject, man, keeps coming up, right? And there's got to be, and there's just a reason for it. I think it's just on a lot of people's minds right now. If you don't exercise the other side of your brain and stepping out of your comfort zone and, you know, where it's not about you and those kinds of things, I think that's a dangerous place to kind of live, man. It's all about them all the time. And whatever they do is like, when you're with them, you're in their world and their world only. And that gets extremely draining. And what do you guys think about? I mean, let's start with Jez. Because you kind of touched on that. What's your opinion about that?
It's important to come out of your comfort zone. It's also important to support other people in their music. One of my favorite things to do is play with someone else who has a need. Like Tyrone, I love some of the things I've heard you talk about on your show. Like when Ellis Marsalis told you about accompanying vocalists.
Yeah.
It was like, well, they're gonna need you. You know, you should do this because then you're gonna get gigs doing this, and and I found through the years I've enjoyed a lot of. I don't do it much anymore, but I've enjoyed a lot of accompanying vocalists. Like, you know, I worked with Francine for so long, Francine Reed, and we did a gig just 2 weeks ago. She was in town, and we did it. I hadn't worked with her in years, and boy, it was so much fun. There's nothing like accompanying a wonderful vocalist. There? I mean, someone really good.
Yeah.
To accompany someone like it. Boy, what a blessing that is, you know.
And it's also, it's like, because I've played with Francine before.
Yeah, she loves you.
But it's also like pressure because you play with her so much, you know her like ins and out. You know, like when you're, and I don't think people really understand when you're playing music, you're getting to learn what's inside the head of the people that you're playing with. You're getting to really know them, right?
That's right, man. Yep.
And so when you spend time the more time you play with Francine Reed, you're like picking up these ebb and flows and stuff like that. And I'm working with her once a year. I can't build that kind of rapport.
All you gotta do is look at her foot.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
And her fingers. I look at her fingers and they're snaps.
But she'll tell me, she'll tell me, she's like, hey, Jez usually gives me this chord before I come in, as if it's a rubato thing. But that's incredibly helpful to me, right? So I'm like, okay, Jez gives this chord. I mean, and accompanying a singer is much like that. When do you push and pull, right? When do you give a chord for them to come in, and when do they lead you? You have to really know the lyrics, right?
You got to know. My approach has always been more minimal with accompanying Francine because she can do it a cappella. She doesn't need anyone, right?
Right.
So I've always been like very minimal. Like I don't do a lot of stuff like some people might do. You know.
Right.
Now a different thing if you were playing like with Dell or anyone that's maybe doing a Sinatra type thing, you want to maybe play more of the high note type things like Bill Miller, Sinatra's piano player, would do, or Johnny Knapp used to do a lot of that stuff. Yeah. You know, but you know, I tend to like lay back more, you know, with Francine and just try and come from a totally supportive place until you get your solo. And then on your solo, you go crazy.
Right, you know? Right. I mean, I did one of those shows at the Fox Theater, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, right? And great readers. And I'm not a terrible reader, but the read on that level is a different discipline, right? So I remember we going in for the rehearsal. Everybody left their book on the stand. I took my book home, right? And the director said, hey, man, can you come in tomorrow? And this is another story. Side note, Bill Hatcher was on the gig. Bill Hatcher didn't need to go over the music, but he says to the director, "Can I come in too?" And the director said, "Yeah, you can come in." Bill Hatcher whispered to me, "You get extra money if they call you in for." I'm going to come in and get a little extra money. So anyway, that's a side note. But anyway, go there, do the gig. Tony Carreri recommended me for the gig. I got it, played it. It was a lot of work. And then he says, "Hey, man, can you do this again?" I said, "Man, this was a lot of work for just this. This is not my bag." And then I had to look at it. I was like, well, I could do this, but am I willing to pay the personal cost to do this? And so I said to myself, well, being true to myself, I really don't want to do these Broadway shows like that. I really want to be able to do stuff where I can interact with people and do this kind of stuff. So I made up in my mind, like, just because I could or would want to impress people by saying, "Oh, Tyrone can read all these theatrical books and all this kind of stuff." Is that what I really want to do? So I could still be true to myself and not say, "Hey, you could grow so much more by doing that." You know, Willie Nelson doesn't have to grow anymore.
And he's 90.
You know, he could grow in his own way, but I don't have to make Willie Nelson sing like Pavarotti to say, okay, he's legitimate or whatever, right?
I think it's a very important thing as we get older, and I think I'm a bit older, I know I am, than you cats, but very important thing to say no. It's one of the most important things you can do is to say no.
Yeah.
And to be true to yourself. Like you said, you could do that gig, but do you want to? And I have a lot of things that I feel that way about, and I generally have had to learn to mainly say no and just do what I really want to do, because time is limited now, the older you get. And I want to practice my piano. You know, I still want to practice and work on my reading and on my classical stuff that I never perform that for anyone. I don't plan on it, but I get a lot out of just practicing it.
Right.
And I still do, you know, even though I play all the time. I love to play my piano.
Or whatever. But how we wish more cats would come out to the session, or let's get together, work on some, but there's such a high fear of the word jazz, right? And man, I got into jazz through not even through the back door, through the crawl space is how I look at it. Because man, I came in, I was already well into my 20s when I really started trying to play jazz. And the only reason
were you a rocker?
I was rocking and funk. That was it. But I got into the Afro Q, all the world stuff. That's what brought me into the jazz world. So I had a little something I could do, but I knew nothing about swinging. I was like, I need something that's going to stimulate me. And something I was teaching. What year would you say this is, Tyrone? Maybe early 2000s, maybe?
Yeah, I would say.
I remember when you used to hang with us at the Martini Club with me and Ramon and Mike. That was
I couldn't play no jazz. I had never done a swing gig.
And I don't know anyone other than you in town that can go from the jazz world to the rock and funk world of the Mike Veal Band and Southern rock and the whole thing with such authority, conviction, honesty, and passion.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, what it did was it gave me a whole nother book of information to pull from for myself, from that vast universe that is the highest level, in my opinion, of music that there is.
Where we need the past. That's where the past comes in.
Yeah, and you've got to get a piece of it.
We live in the past, but we have to learn from the history.
Right.
You have to.
Right.
You can't just jump right to the present.
Right.
I guess is what happens now. That's what we were talking about. There's no mentorship, or people go right to their YouTube, whatever. Yeah, and that's fine too. But I know we all had mentors when we were coming up, and you know, that to me is one of the most important things. Playing with people older than you or more experienced, and learning from people who have had the experience. And if you're lucky enough to have some people that want to show you some things and play with you, you know, you're going to learn from. That's how I learned, playing with people that were better than me. They were older than me.
Well, thank you, Jez, for coming on. I've known you now for gosh. 26 years. I mean, I met you in 98. Is that right? 90,
97, yeah, when we were at the Marquis
97, 98. So
yeah, and you know, you're one of my favorite musicians and people. Both
likewise.
Don't tell him that. Please don't tell him.
Likewise.
Do not tell him that, Jez.
And we haven't, we've played a fair share, but we've never, not really dug in on.
Oh, we get to it.
That's still coming.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever we play, we do, but I'm just talking about like a project or something like that. But
yeah, well, we've talked about things, and eventually
we talked about a lot.
Put it out there that I want to do something with Chris and Tyrone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in. Yeah. I'm in now. Put me in, Coach.
That's a project right there.
You're not. Yeah, you in. You're not out. You in.
But there's no preparation. But no preparation, or no even discussing what we're going to do at all. We just do it.
You got the right ones, then.
Okay, that'll work. All right, Jez. Yeah, really, man. Well, thank you for coming. Thanks for coming on, Jez, and we will see you soon, my man. Thank you.
Good work. Really enjoying watching what you guys are creating, and you're doing a lot of positive and important stuff that you're putting out there, and helping people and helping the community, and getting important concepts out there that need to be discussed. Let's just keep it happening.
Appreciate it, man.